Health and Human Services Policy back to order. We have House File 342 before us. Chair Moran, would you like to move your bill?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that House File 342 be recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Government Operations. And Madam Chair, I do have, I would like to move the DE1 amendment, also incorporating the A2 amendment to the amendment.
Chair Moran moves the DE1 Authors Amendment incorporating the A2 amendment to the amendment. All in favor say aye. All opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Chair Moran, please present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, just for our memory, that we took public testimony on this legislation last week, so there is no discussion or questions from the committee. So we're going to walk through the bill now, and I would like to have our nonpartisan House researcher, Sarah Sunderman, to walk us through the changes.
Ms. Sunderman.
Madam Chair and members, so what I'm going to do here is walk through the DE1 amendment. I'm going to focus on what changed from the underlying bill. So to start, the first several changes have to do with changing the title, which broadens this. So it was the Minnesota African American Family Preservation Act, but we've added and Child Welfare Disproportionality Act. So it broadens the scope of the act, and there are corresponding changes throughout the DE to update the terminology. Let's see. We added a third paragraph under the purposes at the request of the chair to include improving permanency outcomes, including family reunification for African American and other disproportionately represented children. We also updated the, on page 1, line 18 of the DE, updated the statutes to match what is in the DE, the sections. You'll see subdivision 2 at the bottom of page 1 of the DE is slightly different. That was a change in the definition, and the definition that's included in the DE is pulled from U.S. Census Bureau definitions for African American. On the top of page 2 of the DE, this is a slightly different definition, the best interest of the child. This is language from DHS that we incorporated. There are a couple terminology changes, and then in the definitions on page 2 of the DE, line 24, child welfare disproportionality was added, and that was language suggested by DHS. On page 2, and also active efforts was replaced with customized efforts in the DE, which you'll see at the bottom of page 2. And that was DHS suggested language, and it's fairly similar to the active efforts language. It requires diligent efforts and customized action by the local social services agency to provide culturally informed and appropriate services to the children and families that this bill aims to protect. We also added, based on DHS suggestions, subdivision 8 at the top of page 3, which is a definition of disproportionately represented child. So this broadens the scope of the bill by adding this definition to mean a child whose race, culture, ethnicity, language, sexual orientation, religion, or disability status is disproportionately represented in the child welfare system as compared to the representation in the state's total child population. The next several changes were just terminology. I believe the rest of the definitions are the same as the underlying bill. On page 4 of the DE, the next major change is page 4, starting on line 8. This was also based on some DHS language, and it adds a requirement for court review of the local agency's provision of customized efforts as required earlier in this section. And it requires the local agency, the local social services agency, to document those efforts for the court. And then the next change is on page 4, line 16. We added some language that would allow a court to order out-of-home placement in situations where a child's health or welfare is immediately endangered. So it gives the court a bit more discretion. The next several changes are all just terminology changes and no substantive changes in the bill until on page 6 of the DE. On page 6 of the DE. The sections on the reestablishment of the legal parent-child relationship, the ones in the underlying bill have been deleted and replaced with language that appears later in the bill. And that is language from House File 554, the first engrossment, which our committee heard last week, I believe. So I'll explain that once we get to it. And then on top of page 7, the title of section 8 changed slightly. We added "and case review" because of an additional responsibility that we added later in this section. On page 7, line 6, we inserted "intentionally" to make it clear that a social services agency employee must to be subject to so disciplinary actions would have to intentionally withhold information, just to clarify that. On page 7, starting on line 10, in the underlying bill, there was a felony penalty for any of the actions listed in paragraph A. And at the request of the chair, we changed that to be a little less strict, and so just specifying that any of the actions listed in paragraph A would be grounds for adverse employment action. Let's see. On page 7, starting on line 16, we, in the underlying bill, the underlying bill established an African-American child well-being department within the Department of Human Services, and in this DE, that department is replaced with child welfare disproportionality specialists, which are established later in the bill, but there were various references that had to be updated within Section 8 as far as who the local social services agency reported information to. So there are a lot of corresponding changes there. Going to page 8, starting on line 3. This was some language from DHS that the chair wanted to incorporate in the DE. And this was, this would require local social services agencies to conduct a case review every 24 months. And it lists various things that the local social services agency will have to review and then report on every 24 months. So that was a fairly large addition. Let's see. Page 9 on starting on line 4, that is also new language that I I believe, came from DHS, and that is related to the case review. And it would require a local social services agency that has a disproportionate rate of outcomes across the child welfare process to create a remediation plan to address some of the factors that have led to the disproportionate outcomes. And then paragraph H is the same as the underlying bill. Page 9, section 9, the title of the council has changed to reflect the broader scope of the bill. So there are a lot of corresponding changes to that. And then on page 9, the compensation is just the standard compensation under section 15.059, which I believe is $55 a day, so that's different than the underlying bill for the council. The A2 amendment adds back into the DE the membership and composition subdivision for the council that was inadvertently dropped when putting the DE together. This is slightly different than the underlying bill. It makes the council larger, and so it keeps the 15 members, and this is broader as well, from disproportionately represented groups that are listed earlier in the definitions. And then it adds local social services agency representatives from the 6 counties with the highest populations of disproportionately represented children in the state, 2 parents of disproportionately represented children from each of the 4 regions of the state, 1 representative each from Hennepin and Ramsey counties, and specifies that the council will have 2 co-chairs, 1 from DHS or local social services agency, and 1 who is a member of a disproportionately represented group as defined in the DE. And that language is based on some language received from DHS about the council, but also incorporating some of the membership language from the underlying bill. The next several changes are just terminology changes based on the change of the name of the council. Page 10 of the DE, on line 17, that was modified from the underlying bill to make it broader in scope for employment in child welfare, local child welfare agencies. Let's see. If you skip to the rest of the next several changes are just terminology changes based on the changes in the bill, or changes in the DE. The next big change is at the top of page 12. This child welfare disproportionality specialist section replaces the African American Child Wellbeing Department that is in the underlying bill. So instead of a department, this would be 6 child welfare disproportionality specialists that would provide assistance to counties and monitor child welfare processes and outcomes to address and mitigate disparities. Specifies that 2 of the specialists will serve Hennepin County, 2 will serve Ramsey County, and the other 2 will serve northern and southern Minnesota. And then it lists the duties, which are primarily the same as the Child Wellbeing Department in the underlying bill, so that's largely unchanged. It's just 6 specialists rather than a whole department. And I believe the report that is required is largely the same. It requires the disproportionality specialist to provide a quarterly report outlining their activities to the Commissioner of Human Services and the council, and also requires the specialists to publish an annual census of all disproportionately represented children residing in out-of-home placement statewide, and specifies what must be included in the census. The next, let's see. The next major change is on page 13, on line 8. The grants have a broader scope now based on the general term changes we've adopted in this DE. And then the organizations that can receive grants have been broadened a bit to include organizations led by persons from other disproportionately represented groups that serve African American or other disproportionately represented children and their families. So that's slightly broader in the grant section. Most of the rest of the changes in that section are related to the general term changes from the underlying bill. At the bottom of page 13, this is slightly different, or starting at the bottom of page 13 of the DE, there's additional language about the commissioner giving preference to programs in counties with the highest rates of disproportionate outcomes. And that was a request of the chair to focus on those counties. And the rest of the grant section is unchanged from the underlying bill. Starting on page 14, line 15, this is the language from House File 554, the first engrossment that addresses the reestablishment of the legal parent-child relationship and changes some things related to that. So the first subdivision, subdivision 3, the changes in that subdivision allow a county attorney or a parent to petition to reestablish the parent-child relationship and adds some language about the filing fee. And then it also, in that section, lowers the amount of time that the child must have been in foster care after the termination of parental rights from 36 months to 24 months, and removes the age restriction of 15 years. The next section, which is also from House File 554, specifies what a parent's petition to reestablish the legal parent-child relationship must include. And again, that's language straight from the other bill. The next section related to the reestablishment of the parent-child relationship is at the bottom of page 15 of the DE. It starts there, and it just specifies the service of the petition on the parties. It adds the county attorney and the responsible social services agency, since the parent will be the person petitioning. The next section, section 15, again, deletes the age limitation of 15 years old and reduces the amount of time after the TPR in foster care from 36 months to 24 months. And let's see, the next, in the data section, which is on page 17, starting on line 20, there are just some terminology changes there related to the broader changes in the bill. And let's see. And I think those are the major changes, and then there's the repealer at the end, and that is also from House File 554, and that repeals the section that prohibits the appeal of a county attorney decision not to file for reestablishment of the legal parent-child relationship. So that sums up the major changes in the delete everything amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Sunderman. Members, we did take public testimony on this legislation last week, so is there discussion or are there questions? Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that the author has, listened to the testimony and tried to incorporate some of the suggestions, but there's quite a few changes, and I just wanted to get a better understanding. With the new definition on page 1 of African American child, which we are told came from the U.S. Census Bureau, in which they have to connect their history back to Black racial groups of Africa. I'll just say that I think I know of people who don't know. They identify as a person of color because of who they are and what they look like, but who don't necessarily know there are Black colored or dark colored people from many different parts of the world who may or may not know that they have connections back to that particular place. They may be from a different part of the world that has dark-skinned people, and so I'm just wondering if that will create some challenges for some children. I just know there's urban Indians that identify as Native American, but for whatever reason, through their family history, they don't know what tribe were they associated with, but they have always considered themselves Native American. And so I would just think the more that we get really specific, we may run into more situations that don't quite fit. And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to think about that.
Chair Moran.
Madam Chair, Representative Loeffler. I think that, although I may not know what tribe I'm from, I know I'm an African American, right? And these are the standards that has been put before us. When we look at some work that we did around just aggregating data within the educational system, and what was important about that was that, we have a system where we have check boxes to say that you are an African American, but really you may be Somali, you may be Oromo, you may be Nigerian, Liberian. All those things are important to us as individuals, as for cultural identity, right? And so I don't think it's a big issue or concern for me that, that it referenced groups from Africa. It's not a big deal, but what I do know is that I'm Black and I'm an African American.
Thank you, Chair Moran. And if I may, Representative Loeffler, I think the language has been broadened in the amendment with the expression disproportionately represented child. I think that may address your concern.
Right. Well, and that was going to be my next question, Madam Chair. In the definition of disproportionately represented child, it's the number of children in a system compared to the state's total child population. And that might actually make some groups not be declared disproportionately represented because we have small ethnic groups. I'm thinking of the Karen people who came as refugees and disproportionately were located in certain parts of Minnesota, but would not even show up as a blip on against a statewide number, but they might be a significant group within a particular community. And so I just wondered if we wanted a different measure than the state's total population in making that decision. But you've got a large group of people who could potentially be disproportionately represented, so it's hard to know which is best. But I just thought we should think that through about whether that measure will, particularly pick up that group. I mean, I'm just thinking even with the most severely, people with the most severe disabilities tend to cluster in communities near medical facilities that they're dependent upon. And so they would be a disproportionate part of a population in certain communities, but not statewide.
I think African Americans know they're African Americans, and I think a lot of this is self-identifying who you are. So, the standard is if you have a drop of Black in you, you're Black, you are. So if you got 2 or 3 different races You know, if you have a black parent and a white parent, you are African American. You know, if you have a Native American, I mean, I think people self-identify who they are. I'm not too sure where the confusion, I'm not too sure where we are with this part of it, of an African-American child.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd actually moved
Representative
on
Loeffler.
from that particular definition. I just had not seen that before and wondered if it was broad enough to pick up the diversity that we might have of people who come from other countries and other parts of the world who identify as black but may have come from a Caribbean island or somewhere else, and that's what they identify. But my second point was just about whether on disproportionality you wanted to use the state population or the population of a region, for example, of the state or something like that, that was closer to pick up small groups that might only be located, say, for example, in the metro area, but wouldn't show up on a statewide number when you're trying to determine proportionality.
Chair Moran.
So, you want to,
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense.
Please state your name for the record.
Sorry, yep, Khalees Houston, founder of Village Arms, chair of the NAACP's Child Protection Committee.
Thank you.
And I guess that's something that we could discuss, amending the bill for again to include those populations, excuse me, that may not have like a large representation across the state, so. Understood.
Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Chair Moran. I think clearly your intentions with this bill are to help solve a significant issue, and I appreciate that. I have some concern on page 6. There are a series of things listed for which a child, there are a series of reasons for which a child or termination of parental rights could happen. And my concern is that that list is probably not exhaustive and complete. So, per our discussion, I have a series of amendments to add some pieces of this. So with that, I would like to move the A6 amendment.
Representative New moves the A6 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This simply adds to the list of reasons that parental rights could be terminated, the murder of an unborn child in the first, second, or third degree under current statute.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
yes, Madam Chair. I agree, so I will take that amendment.
Any discussion from the members on the amendment? Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm wondering if council could tell us what these sections refer to?
Ms. Sunderman.
Madam Chair, members, these sections refer to the sections that correspond with murder, the crime of murder of an unborn child in the first degree, murder of an unborn child in the second degree, and murder of an unborn child in the third degree, that are existing crimes.
Madam Chair, my question is this,
Representative Loeffler.
Killing the mother and in that process, killing the child in utero, or is this related to abortion or other circumstances? That was my question about the reference to the 609.2661, et cetera.
Ms. Sunderman.
No, it would not include abortion. The definition of whoever in the statute does not include the pregnant woman.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the, was it A6? The A6 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion prevails.
Madam Chair.
Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next, I would move the A7 amendment.
Representative New moves the A7 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this amendment, similar, adds to the list. This one adds engaging in hiring or agreeing to hire a minor to engage in prostitution, again, according to current statute.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I looked at this one also, and, you know, we've moved several legislation in this body around trafficking and especially within our youth trafficking. And so if you have a parent who is trafficking their own child, I see reasons not to want to allow that parent to petition to have parental rights over that child. So I'm going to be in agreement with this amendment also.
Thank you, Chair Moran. Any discussion from the members on the amendment?
Madam Chair.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to kind of clarify with each of these that as I look at the list on page 6, these are not necessarily reasons that parental rights would be terminated. It's simply that something that's not, if that termination can only occur when one of these items is present. And I guess I just want to confirm, maybe it's from Ms. Sunderman or otherwise. So it's not that necessarily that there be a termination of parental rights because the parent engaged in what is in the A7 amendment, but merely that can't prevent a termination.
Ms. Sunderman.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of adopting the A7 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion prevails. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A8.
Representative New moves the A8 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, under the same section, we would add kidnapping under current statute.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
I'm going to accept that one also.
Any discussion from members on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the A7 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion prevails. Representative New.
Madam Chair, thank you. Again, in the same section, we would add possession of pornographic work involving minors, again, under current statute.
Representative New moves the A8 amendment.
A9, I
A9
apologize.
amendment?
Yes, I move the A9 amendment.
Representative
Getting
New,
ahead of
please speak
myself.
to the amendment.
Yes,
You just-
again.
Okay. Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. After looking over this one also, this pornographic, so I'm gonna accept this amendment also.
Thank you. Any discussion from members on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the A9 amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion prevails. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A10 amendment.
Representative New moves the A10 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Again, in the same section, this would add felony domestic assault under current statute.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
Representative Newf, can you talk a little bit more about the felony domestic assault? Is that domestic assault of the parent, the child? Can you talk a little bit more about that one?
Representative New.
Sure. In fact, I guess I would ask nonpartisan staff to maybe reference the current statute.
Stalling. Ms. Sunderman.
Madam Chair and members, just, we'll have to look this up specifically. Madam Chair and members, Section 609.2242, which is domestic assault, applies to actions against a family or household member. So presumably that would include a child. So and I will check on the next one. I can get more information on that, but at first reading it, it does appear to include any family or household member.
Any member of the household, yes.
Thank you. Chair Moran.
So as I look at this one and think about it, and as I think about this amendment, felony domestic assault, I'm not sure if I'm all the way there to say that if that happened to a family member, a wife or a husband or aunt, or, you know, whether or not that would prevent that individual, that mother or father, from ever having the opportunity to petition for parental rights. Can House research tell me whether or not they lose parental rights?
Ms. Sunderman?
Madam Chair and members, the way this is written is just that it would allow a court to terminate parental rights within the court's discretion if any of these crimes were committed by the parent. So it wouldn't necessarily mean automatically that felony domestic assault would immediately or definitely lead to a termination of parental rights, the way it's written.
Chair Moran?
I'm going to let Representative Loeffler.
Representative Loeffler?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and maybe this is going to judiciary and they can better weigh some of these legal things for those of us who don't usually do this, but all of these things are terrible, and you don't want people who have committed really egregious crimes to be able to be in charge of a child's life. But this is on termination, but it's alleged under line 6.15. It's not convicted of, it's alleged. And I'm just wondering if that's a different standard, because I suspect in some of these situations, like on felony abuse, a child can say, my father, my mother hit me this hard, and maybe it would reach to that level. I don't know. They were on drugs, they were high, they were whatever, doing something. But it's alleged. I mean, it's just a charge. It hasn't been established. And I'm wondering why it's alleged rather than confirmed. Because on most of these things, we wouldn't have any disagreement. But we know the kids that come into Child Protection Services are people who have kids who have been overly disciplined. But we usually, I think the system tends to look into what was happening. The dad is psychotic and went off medications and, you know, was having hallucinations. I mean, I always like that when the courts deal with things, they figure it out when they make someone guilty or not. And so I'm just a little nervous about the alleged line here, but I'm not very familiar with the court proceedings on any of this.
Representative Pinto?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I look at this, I think it's important for folks to direct their attention to 6.15, which references egregious harm. So if egregious harm is present, then you don't need any of the rest of this. And the definition of egregious harm does include conduct towards a child that constitutes assault. So any kind of assault can constitute, says egregious harm includes but is not limited to a number of the points, and then one of the clauses is conduct towards a child that constitutes assault. And so I guess I I just don't know that this is needed in that way, in that once you have assault present, and there's references to the different criminal provisions that constitute assault, and this felony domestic assault provision would be drawn from it. So I guess, Representative New, I'm not sure that this is needed in that way, because really it's egregious harm that is kind of capturing all of this in that way that's already included in this paragraph.
Representative New?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think it's an important distinction to make that if we include this amendment, this does not mean that parental rights will be terminated if there is domestic assault. However, if we do not include this amendment, there's a chance that this could fall under egregious harm, but then it's completely up to the courts. And And therefore, theoretically, we couldn't terminate parental rights based on domestic assault. I think this is important. I think because the underlying bill already lays out a series of very specific things, I think it's important to make sure that we include those things that really are serious. And Madam Chair, I would ask for a roll call.
Chair Moran?
So I agree with like Representative Loeffler and thank you Representative Pinto for like clarifying what is egregious harm. That all this is terrible. It's something that we would never want to wish upon a child or individual. Before we go to a vote, I would like to have Mrs. Houston just respond to this amendment.
Ms. Houston?
Thank you. So the original language for the bill listed egregious harm because of what Representative Pinto stated, that it kind of outlines all of those smaller incidences of abuse against children. I want to keep the conversation within context of the 15,000 children placed in out-of-home placement in 2016. Only 9% were placed there for physical abuse and about 2% for sexual abuse. Everything else is circumstantial. The disproportionality that exists for African-American families is what this bill is looking to address. We've had wrongful terminations. We've been wrongfully involved in the process. A lot of our children are still languishing in foster care. So this bill is really to remedy that, but to also reduce disparities moving forward. We aren't talking about monsters. We aren't talking about overly abusive people that are addicted to drugs. We're talking about parents that have similar struggles as every other population. So I just want us to keep that in mind moving forward. There's a very low number of children involved in child protection for actual abuse.
So in saying that, I'm going to accept this language. I'm going to accept it.
Representative New, would you still like a roll call?
Yes, please.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Moran,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrison,
Yes.
Representative Keel,
Yes.
Representative Albright, Representative Backer,
Yes.
Representative Bonner,
Yes.
Representative Edelson, Representative Fisher,
Yes.
Representative Freiberg, Representative Liebling,
Yes.
Representative Loeffler,
Yes.
Representative Mann, Representative New,
Yes.
Representative Pearson, Representative Pinto,
Yes.
Representative Robbins,
Yes.
Representative Schumacher,
Yes.
Representative Schultz.
Yes. There being 15 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A11 amendment.
Representative New moves the A11 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Sure. Again, in the same section, this would just simply add domestic assault by strangulation, again, under current statute, as is defined.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just like the other amendments, this is all under egregious harm, and so I'm going to accept the language.
Any discussion from members? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the A11 amendment? Please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion prevails. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd move the A13 amendment.
Representative New moves the A13 amendment. Representative New, please speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, in the same section, this one is just a little bit different. This would include manslaughter of an unborn child in the first or second degree, again, under current statute.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the
Yes, Madam
amendment?
Chair, and again, I'm going to accept that language.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the A13 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion prevails. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one final amendment. The A4 amendment, specifically, I believe it was Representative Pinto who expressed that termination can only occur. I could be wrong if it was you, Representative Pinto. Maybe it was somebody else, but I was listening. I wrote it down. I didn't write down the name. But termination can only occur when one of these things happens. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong amendment. I'm looking at the wrong one. Here we go. Under disproportionately represented families, I just want to include, well, let's move the A4 amendment.
Okay, so we're starting over. Representative New moves the A4 amendment. Representative New, please speak
Thank
to
you,
the
Madam
amendment.
Chair. This is on a different section of the bill. I'm glad that this was changed to the Child Welfare Disproportionality Act. And under a disproportionately represented child, I just wanted to add, in fact, I'm glad Mrs. Houston is here. I had written down at our last committee hearing that she had said when you control for income level, employment, location, and these things, in these circumstances, the outcomes are very different for children. So what I would like to do is amend the language in the disproportionately represented child to include a child whose family income is equal to or less than 100% of the federal poverty guidelines, so that we are capturing that group that's also disproportionately represented in these kinds of cases.
Chair Moran, do you have any comments on the amendment?
So this has been like one of the most difficult amendment that I have struggled with. And it's been difficult because I think I'm a strong advocate for the poor, the homeless. And I really get the spirit in which this was written, but I think it just really expand the disproportionate representation of the child that we're looking to cover. I just think it just goes beyond that definition. And so because of that, I would not be accepting this amendment.
Is there discussion among the members? Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And there's no definition of what the time frame is. If someone is unemployed, their income will be temporarily, if they qualify for unemployment, and we know many people don't, but if they qualify for unemployment, it oftentimes is less than 100% of poverty. If they're laid off between jobs, they're working part-time and their hours get cut. I mean, I just feel like setting that threshold is really just stereotyping people who are temporarily. I mean, even our MFIP population tends to be on the program pretty short amount of time because you can't live on $500 and some dollars a month. And so I'm just not sure how we're going to define this. Is it at the time of the neglect? We heard in committee that 84% of the children that are reported, it's cases of neglect. And it's the child who shows up without a heavy enough winter coat or didn't have mittens. It's the kid who says, we didn't get dinner last night, that gets reported, and they want to find out what's happening in that household. And those are oftentimes during these tough financial times when families are in transition before they've figured out how to get onto a safety net program, whether it's food support or whether it's finding out what are the hours of the local food shelf, or how can they get some donated clothes because their child has outgrown what fit them last winter. And so I don't know that the goal is to capture those families that, quite honestly, our social service system does a great job of stepping in and helping that family get the resources they need. And because we have so many mandated reporters, and we should have, a lot of those reports, 84% of them, are cases of neglect where they think there's something key that should be in that child's life that isn't, and they want someone to check into it. And I think by putting in this low a poverty measure, you're just going to be picking up those 84%, which I don't think is the goal of this bill. So this one I have some concerns about in terms of adding that as a definition of disproportionality, unless the goal really is to say 100% of the kids that come into the system should go through this.
Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly understand the concerns. At the same time, I'm not sure that we should exclude disproportionately represented groups simply because it expands the bill. I mean, if the goal is to offer additional protections to these disproportionately represented families and groups, which I think is a good goal, I'm not sure I understand the logic of excluding some of those disproportionately represented groups. I would encourage a yes vote on the amendment.
Further discussion? Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say briefly, I guess, Representative New, I guess I'm not understanding. I understand that general goal, but I don't understand how that works in the context of the bill. That there's, I mean, and kind of in the broader context here, that there's this recognition that there is this disproportionality that really ties in with, let's face it, disparate impact throughout many aspects of society. Certainly poverty is a huge concern, but I guess I'm not quite understanding how with each of the steps of the bill where it talks about disproportionately represented child, if we're talking about children who are disproportionately represented based on family income, at that point, you've got a series of steps where, I mean, I think for many of us, this is a system that needs sustained attention and an effort from all of us, so it's improved for every single child passing through the system. And Representative Moran has identified a particular concern having to do with kids of color generally, African-American kids and families in particular, and that's what the bill is aimed at. And I feel like it's sort of fitting a bit of a square peg into a round hole for adjusting it based on income. What I would say is for your interest to improve outcomes for kids in poverty, setting aside racial and cultural factors, is let's focus attention as a body, as a whole, on improving our entire child protection, child welfare system, which I don't see this going against that at all. This is part of that broad effort. So I would oppose the amendment as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the A4 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. The amendment does not prevail. Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just lastly, just a comment. Representative or Chair Moran was gracious enough to come and talk to me about some amendments, and I really appreciated that. The only thing I would add is because, again, on page 6, this list of issues that would basically allow the courts to terminate parental rights if they so chose. I have concerns that list is very specific and probably not exhaustive. So I would just encourage, as to our discussion earlier, looking at that language and seeing if there are ways to make sure that includes anything that really could be harmful to kids. Obviously, that's our goal here, is to make sure that kids are safe and in a safe place, and ideally that's with their families. Thank you.
Chair Moran, do you have any final comments about your bill?
Madam Chair and members, this is a good bill. What we do know is that there are huge disparities within our child welfare system for African-American children and families. And recognizing that there are other categories of individuals that we also want to protect. And that this bill in the D1 amendment addresses that. That we want to make sure that the well-being of all children is paramount and at the forefront of how we do our work here at the state. And so I just ask for everyone's support in this bill as we move forward. I am still in conversation with county individuals and county folks, just to make sure that we have a strong bill that's doing what we need to do to keep kids safe and look at the well-being of all kids, to ensure that when kids need to be removed from their homes, that we look at relative first. That is important to the communities that we are addressing in this bill. And yeah, just ask for your support. Thank you.
Chair Moran renews her motion that House File 342 as amended be recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Government Operations. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion prevails. House File 342 as amended is recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Government Operations.